Okay, so we are going to be talking about the fifth chapter of Masechet Shevi'it. And I would say that a major topic in the fifth chapter is the kind of the enforcement issues that are involved with the Shemitah year. During the Shemitah year, a person is not supposed to work the land at all, but there are some permitted activities that might kind of look like forbidden activities, and one question will be, how can one engage in those permitted activities in a way that will not call one's actions into suspicion? And at the end of the Perek, as we'll see, there's also a concern about how do we interact with other people who we might suspect of violating the Shemitah year. So as an example, in the second Mishnah of the Perek, there's a discussion of the luf. Luf would seem to be some sort of onion that even after it was harvested, you might choose to sort of store it. I guess they didn't have refrigeration back then. So you would store it by digging a hole in the ground and placing those onions in the ground. The problem is that if you do that, it kind of might look like you're planting. And so the Mishnah says that Rabbi Meir says that it's really important, if you're going to do this, to put a lot of onions in all in one place. And that way it'll be clear that what you're doing is just storing the onions in the ground and not planting anything in the ground. Similarly, we're told that if a person later on wants to remove those onions from the ground, the fourth Mishnah says, Beit says that actually what you should do is you shouldn't use a regular kind of metal implement to get those onions out of the ground. Instead, you should use a wooden implement, because then it'll just be clear that what you're doing is not actually working the land in a real way, but just kind of uncovering your onions that you've been storing there. On the other hand, Beit says actually it's so clear that what you're doing is uncovering these onions, you can even use metal implements. So they're not, in that case, Beit is not worried that other people will kind of suspect us of doing the wrong thing, because it's super clear that these onions, and actually there are two other kinds of things here that are also mentioned that you're permitted to remove from the ground. All those things, it's obvious, everybody knows it's not a violation of Shemitah to do that, so you can even use metal implements. Beit Shammai wants to be even more careful though, and they say no, even if people know, better to not even cause a smidgen of suspicion, and so therefore wooden implements should be used. Further on in the chapter, we're told that if a person is suspected of not being careful with the Shemitah year, then a person, an artisan, is not allowed to sell certain farm implements to them, lest they come to kind of cause them or enable them to violate the Shemitah year. So we're told at the beginning of the sixth Mishnah, Elu kilim she'ein ha'uman rashai l'mochram b'shvi'it. There are certain types of vessels that a craftsperson is not allowed to sell during the Shemitah year. You can't sell plows or yokes or other types of implements that enable planting or tilling. But you can sell other types of things that have multiple uses, like a wagon or some sort of harvesting equipment that you could use to harvest kind of little amounts that you're allowed to take from fields during the Shemitah year. And the Mishnah concludes with a general principle: Zeh haklal, kol shemelachto miyuchedet la'avera asur. This is the principle. If it's the sort of thing that that is always going to be used for a prohibited Shemitah activity, then that should not be sold. But le'isur u'leheter mutar. But if it's the sort of thing that can be used for both something permitted and for forbidden, then we can kind of ascribe good intentions to people and say that it will only be used for a permitted activity. Similarly, in the eighth Mishnah in the Perek, Beit Shammai say, Lo yimkor lo parach o reshet b'shvi'it, that during the Shemitah year, a person should not sell a cow that's used for plowing, because then you might kind of be helping another person plow their fields in this transgressive way during the Shemitah year. But Beit Hillel say no, it's permitted mipnei shehu yachol l'shochta. When you sell the cow, you don't know for sure that it's going to be used for plowing purposes. Maybe it will be somebody's dinner, right? And as long as it's possible to ascribe good intentions, then we should ascribe good intentions to other people. And all of this leads us to the very last Mishnah of the Perek, which has to do with we're told in the beginning of the ninth Mishnah, Mashelet isha l'chaverta chashuda l'shvi'it. Women can lend the following household items to their friends, even if they suspect that their friends are violating the Shemitah year. Nafa, ukfara, v'rechaim, v'tanur, various kinds of sifters and a millstone and an oven, things that might be used for processing kind of perhaps like produce that was gotten in an illegal way during the Shemitah year. And the Mishnah says, "V'kulam lo amu ela mipnei darkei shalom." And the reason why we do this is that we want people to be able to live peacefully with one another. And so, even if we might suspect them of violating the Shevi'it, if we don't know for sure, we still want to be able to help them out, and to sort of engage with each other in a civil manner. And we're told at the end of the Perek, when non-Jews are working the land during the Shemitah year, which they're allowed to do, we're allowed to say encouraging things to them. But if we see an Israelite working the fields in an illegal way during the Shemitah year, then we should not say encouraging things. And we conclude by saying, "V'shoalim b'shloman mipnei darkei shalom." And when it comes to the non-Jews, not only can we say encouraging things, but generally we should greet them in a good way in order to promote the path of peace, in order to kind of encourage good communal feeling. I think at this point in in our journey through the COVID pandemic, there's been a lot of kind of fraying of social ties. And I think the message maybe that we can get from this Perek is that we both want to kind of always be behaving in ways that will not cause other people to suspect us of doing something wrong, and along with that kind of try to similarly kind of judge other people favorably whenever possible. And even if we think that they might not be doing something right, we should still, as much as possible, try to ascribe good intentions to them. Wonderful to learn Masechet Shevi'it with you.